So we should be streaming, I hope. Just need to check. Looks like we are, or at least it's connecting. So there we go. Okay, we are. Welcome to Question Time Analysis with Daily Brexit. I'm Olly Connelly. Good evening. So, first of all, a note for social networks and the BBC. I am using this content on a fair dealing basis. I realise that this may change tomorrow because of Article 17, the EU legislation coming into force, which means that you're supposed to get permission from content providers to use their content. Well, you know what? You are the news, BBC, and so I'm using this under UK law, and any attempt to prevent that is a violation of UK law, and indeed the law of many, many countries around the world. So social networks kindly don't censor what is a news story, and the news story is that the BBC is a propagandist outfit, as is proven just tonight by looking at the panel of Question Time. Let's have a look and see who's on the Question Time panel tonight. According to Media Guido, Guido Fawkes, order.com, extraordinary panel tonight on the BBC's flagship political programme, which is coming up in about 5 minutes, people. Not one single panellist voted to leave the EU. Daily Mirror hack, as well as that paper's former editor, a Labour MP who works under John McDonnell and used to be an MEP, an SNP identikit frontbencher, and to balance them all out, the leading light of the Tory left, and of course the chair works for the BBC, and I would bet my bacon that she voted Remain as well. Top comment on Guido, I think, is just about sums it up. Further vindication, says the pale blue dot, for those like me who have stopped paying the licence fee. And quite right too, pale blue dot. Don't pay for propaganda. Let's just have a quick look at the Express's take on it. BBC Question Time, Piers Morgan left to argue for Brexit alone against 4 Remainers. Piers Morgan these days does talk a pretty good hand in terms of Brexit.
Liable to say anything that
but
the palace might,
the fact
because
is
when you
that he voted to remain. BBC Question Time's panel will not feature one single person who voted to leave the European Union tonight, leaving just Piers Morgan making the case for respecting the 2016 referendum result. The Good Morning Britain presenter voted to remain in the EU in the referendum 3 years ago. However, he has since been vocal about how he would swing towards leaving if there was a second referendum. This means he will be the only panellist offering the benefits. Okay, let's get on with it.
We're in Thetford. Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, Nicky Morgan, former Treasury Minister and Secretary of State for Education under David Cameron, now a prominent Tory backbencher. Annalise Dodds, Labour's Shadow Treasury Minister and a former MEP. Business and industry spokesperson for the SNP at Westminster, Drew Hendry. Alison Phillips, columnist and editor of the Daily Mirror. And journalist, author, co-host of ITV's Good Morning Britain and a chum of Donald Trump, Piers Morgan.
Just as an aside, very briefly, I'm having to use a very low bit rate. If the quality is not very good, it's because I'm going through a VPN.
Our panel here, to our audience, and of course to you at home, you can argue along in the usual fashion. You know how to do it, using hashtag BBCQT on Facebook, on Instagram and on Twitter. Join in the conversation. Right, let's have our first question tonight, which is from Kyle Bradshaw.
Should the leader of the opposition be protesting against the President of the United States?
Of course, Jeremy Corbyn was at a protest while Donald Trump was here. Nicky Morgan.
No, I don't think he should be, because actually, whatever we might think about Donald Trump, per se, actually he is the President of the United States, and one would assume that the leader of the opposition I shall do all I can to stop him becoming Prime Minister, but presumably he wants to become Prime Minister, and as Prime Minister representing this country, he would need to have a relationship with one of our most important allies and the leader of one of our most important relationships around the world. And this week he has shown that actually he's not wanting to do that, take on that responsibility. But
he did try to have a meeting with Donald Trump, but
well, he tried to have,
didn't appear to want to.
He was invited to the state banquet. He was invited, I think, to opportunities to meet him, and instead he chose to be out whipping up people into protest. Of course, there is a place for protest, there's a place for free speech, but no. The leader of the opposition, if he's serious about wanting to get into government, and he's shown this week that he is not serious about wanting to be in government, he is about protest.
Annelies?
Maybe he should be about having some respect for the leader of the country that, had they not come to our aid, our country would be absolutely swamped in swastikas. But anyway.
Actually, that particularly during this week, we should have a state visit for somebody like President Trump. And it was a state visit. It would have been perfectly possible for him to come, quite rightly, to participate in those very, very important commemorations that we have on this week in an official capacity, as indeed did other leaders. But instead, the government decided to give him that state visit.
But you know the argument that's come up time and time again about this, which is why Jeremy Corbyn thought it was OK to go to attend a state visit for Xi Jinping of China, who's been massively criticised for human rights violations, mass detention of the Uyghur people. Why is that?
Yeah, they have concentration camps in China, yeah? I mean, come on, yeah? We're talking about Donald Trump, who wants to give us a trade deal, for crying out loud.
That's OK. But it's not OK to be Donald Trump?
Because these are very different circumstances, because with the US, quite rightly, we've got a special relationship. That special relationship is based on democratic values, which sadly, President Trump is not heeding. And even before he came into our country, he was criticising British institutions, some of which are not able to answer back. He was criticising members of our royal family. He was criticising the Mayor of London.
That he was.
And
was it a bit embarrassing when it came out about
this
meeting that Jeremy Corbyn had requested?
I think he's defending democracy now. I think he's defending democracy. Let me just quickly read something that he said today, which I think is very pertinent. Let me see if I can pull this up quickly. This quote, which the BBC did not use, by the way. They used the first sentence. These men ran through the fires of hell, talking about those guys on D-Day, yeah? Moved by a force no weapon could destroy. Now, the BBC cut it off there, but he carried on to say the fierce patriotism of a free, proud and sovereign people. They battled not for control and domination, i.e. such as the EU. This is what he said today, Trump, yeah, in front of Macron. But for liberty, democracy and self-rule. That's what the president of the free world said today. He is on the side of the democracy, the democratic choice of the British people.
With Trump.
I don't think
because he was protesting. No, he'd requested a meeting, but that only became apparent when Donald Trump mentioned it. Was that not?
No, quite the opposite. The whole point of requesting that meeting is because we need to have a robust dialogue with President Trump. But according him, all that pomp and splendour of a state visit was completely inappropriate. And that was why Jeremy said, let's have a meeting, let's have that robust dialogue, but we should not be giving him that legitimacy through a state visit. And, this is not about the UK's relationship with the US. That's not what it's about. It's about whether it's right to honour President Trump in this way
utterly
as an
wrong.
individual.
Utterly
and I'm afraid
wrong.
That's what we
he
did
is the leader, the president of
our
our
the wrong decision.
best
It should
ally.
not have happened.
Piers.
Moron.
Well, the truth about Jeremy Corbyn is, had it been a Hamas terrorist or an IRA terrorist or somebody like that, well, sorry.
You're getting mass groans from the audience,
Fine.
Piers. I have to point that out.
You may not want to hear the truth, but it's the truth. Had it been somebody of that ilk, Jeremy Corbyn would have been around there making them cups of tea. Just as he rolled up to the Buckingham Palace for the state banquet for President Xi of China, which, has a far worse human rights record than America.
That's right.
The
Correct.
point about it was it wasn't a personal visit. Donald Trump was invited on a state visit by the Queen, by Her Majesty the Queen, because it's the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And it was a chance to bring together these two great countries, which 75 years ago fought for our freedom and democracy. That's why Donald Trump was here. And, you know, we have to work out who our friends are in
China,
this world
which
right now has a far worse human rights record. It's a rough world. And Donald Trump is the president of our #1 ally. And as we leave the European Union, which we have to do, and I'm sure we'll come to this, as we leave the European Union, never has that relationship been more important. And the spectacle, frankly, of the Labour mayor of London spending 2 days before Trump even got here, howling abuse about him in print and on the airwaves, and then the leader of the Labour Party, having been turned down for his meeting, then marching around, leading the protests, shouting and screaming. What kind of message does that send in the week of D-Day to the President of the United States, and more importantly, to the people he represents back in America, the American people who, when we needed them 75 years ago, they were there for us.
Okay.
And I think
That's
he can
right.
protest,
Well
but
said.
I'm also entitled to say that protest was unedifying and embarrassing to this country.
Let's hear
Yes.
from you. The man in the check shirt.
Her Majesty the Queen is regarded across the world as one of the best leaders there is. She is neutral and she has a great deal of diplomacy. What part of that does Jeremy Corbyn fill on a world stage?
Let's hear the man here. I'll come back to you, Annalise.
Piers made a point. We're just trying to leave the European Union, and never more than now. We're trying to be an outward-facing country. We've got to engage with countries all over the world outside of Europe, and then you have this kind of protest going on with one of the biggest countries in the world that we need to trade with, we need to engage with. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Woman at the back there.
Can I just say that that wasn't a proper demonstration? That was a disgusting spectacle of an effigy of Donald Trump, a US president, democratically elected. It wasn't a coup, he was democratically elected, sitting on a toilet in the middle of central London. That was disgusting. Sadiq Khan should be spending more time trying to control the knife epidemic going on in London instead of protesting against Donald Trump.
Can I see, is there anyone in the audience who
Well
supports
said.
Jeremy Corbyn's decision to protest? Yes, the man here in the jacket, in the striped shirt.
I think protest is all well and good. I think it's part of the democracy in which we live. But I think Jeremy Corbyn should have met Trump and he should have protested face to face with the man rather than on the street. That would have made him a much more credible leader of the opposition, which we are sadly lacking at the moment.
The man in the white shirt in the back.
We're lacking
Piers
representation,
Morgan
full
talks
stop.
brought up about D-Day there, and I've seen a lot on social media about people saying it's disrespectful to the memory of those who fought on D-Day to protest in that manner. What I would say is actually more disrespectful to the memories of the people who fought on D-Day is to not protest and simply wave out a red carpet for a racist a misogynist, who is allowing who is allowing children to die in immigrant camps.
I'm sorry. Where is the evidence that this man is a racist? Where is the evidence that he is a racist? Somebody give me the evidence that he's a racist. There is none. Absolutely none. A misogynist? Yeah, he said something once that a whole bunch of folks would have said down the public bar. Frankly, possibly including me, when I'd had a drink or two, yeah? And it was taken off the record. It was something that was said in private and it was put on the record by a member of the Bush family, yeah? A member of the Bush family. That's the only thing that they've got on Trump is one comment. That is it.
On his watch, you know, you talk about human rights. Where's the human rights for those who are dying in the immigrant camps he's setting up?
When you say they're dying, you're talking about children being separated from their parents. I think that's what you're talking about. Drew, Ian Blackford was also protesting, wasn't he?
Well, it is really important to engage with people when you don't agree with them. But let's face it, a state visit, which would have been requested by the Prime Minister through the Queen, a state visit is an honour, not a requirement for that engagement. And we obviously must, make sure that we're working with our allies and working with people to get that engagement, building on a strong relationship we've had with America.
But do you think Blackford was right to be protesting?
But that relationship lasts long after Donald Trump has left office. That has been something that's endured for a long time and will endure. And it's really important to tell people when they've got things wrong face to face. I agree with the comment that was made earlier. So yes, you should protest when it's appropriate. You should also engage when it's appropriate.
Did the SNP request a meeting with Trump?
Well, I don't know if we've actually requested a meeting, but I'm sure that we would have been willing to take one with him in order to point out that the policies that he's put forward in terms of being a climate change denier, in terms of saying that he's going to...
You see, I don't know that he's a climate change denier. He just doesn't know the science. Again, this is just so much smearing that goes on here. It seems to me that this guy, he doesn't trust the motives behind these people that are trying to tax people into oblivion, and the climate being the latest way to do that, and to control people and to condition people. I think that he's concerned about that. And you know what? If these climate lobbyists took this climate business really, truly seriously, they would say, let's sort out packaging and let's sort out hemp. And they don't. And that is very, very telling. Paris was a joke, and Trump has quite correctly called that out. And the other thing that he said is that, you know what, we can do everything, we go the whole hog so far as to try and sort out all this, green stuff. But the bottom line is, unless the Chinese get behind it, everything we do is absolutely useless. They continue to open up coal-fired energy plants in China. Loads and loads and loads, dozens every year they're opening up coal-fired energy plants. Until we sort out the Chinese and they come on side, frankly, everything we do is pretty much futile.
To put the Iran nuclear deal in jeopardy by withdrawing from that he may come out of NATO are not helpful.
Yeah, okay. He had an opinion on Iran that was different to that of Obama. Well, fair play. I mean, come on. Yeah, fair play.
To our security, or indeed to the benefit of people. And it's very clear that in Scotland, his values are not those values of the people of Scotland. It's very, very clear that people don't react that way. And for somebody who has
generalization
parents from their children, and those children have actually been put in cages, it is important not to roll out the red carpet and enable that kind of behaviour. You can engage.
That was going on under Obama as well. Obama, he kicked out 3 million migrants, as I understand it, during his presidency. Yeah, nothing has changed. That isn't about Trump. That's about migration policy.
But we shouldn't be
We did roll out the red carpet for Barack Obama, and he deported 3 million illegal immigrants. He was known as the deporter in chief. Okay. And we also rolled it out for Tony Blair rolled it out for George W. Bush 6 months after the illegal Iraq war. So, Labour...
Okay, but Piers, I want to hear from the rest of the panel.
It doesn't make it right, exactly. It does mean there's a double standard about Trump, which I find a little bit irritating, frankly.
I think the thing with Donald Trump, as gentleman there said, there are clearly a lot of things about him that don't sit well with British values. I mean, we know he's been racist. We know he's separated children from their parents. We know that some of the ways that he's treated women have been appalling. But when you're in a high position in politics, you don't have to like everybody that you deal with.
I'm sorry, where's the evidence for that? He made one comment. Apart from that, what do we know? What do we know? Put up or shut up.
And I think if you look at the way the Queen tackled this issue this week, she was pitch perfect in that she had this bully, I mean, Piers may not agree, this sort of braying character who is what he is with Donald Trump.
This is just smear with no evidence.
And she, in the state banquet, when she said about the importance of the institutions that have kept us security and stability since the Second World War, you hope that he listened to those words, and you hope that in this week of all weeks, indeed...
Why should he listen to her opinion? Why should her opinion be singularly important?
He sees the value of alliances, and that is the message you would have liked Jeremy Corbyn to have taken to him face to face, rather than down a microphone at a rally.
Just waffle, absolute waffle and smear.
I very much agree with your point, but I would question if we should be honouring a man who wants to negotiate for our NHS as part of his trade deal when he arrived.
Oh gosh, it's truth. I mean, I can't blame this lady, because she's basically conditioned by what she probably read on the front pages of the rags yesterday morning or whenever it was. He backtracked on that in the interview with Piers Morgan, didn't he? In fact, actually, during the interview, during the press conference with Theresa May itself, he didn't even know what the NHS was. He had to ask Theresa May, what's he talking about? And she said, it's our National Health Service. And guess what? In a trade negotiation, you start, if you're a leader of a country, you are defending your people, you will start asking for everything and then you will negotiate down. Theresa May, that's what you should have done with the EU.
I mean, I completely agree on that point, but I think you have to negotiate with people where you may not like what they say, you may not want to agree with them. And I think the very idea that American pharmaceutical companies, American businesses have got our NHS is absolutely abhorrent, and it has to be stopped at all costs. But that doesn't mean to say you shouldn't speak to people.
Let's have a question from...
She has got a point there, I have to say. It is a concern, the prices of drugs in the United States, and that is something that we have to be careful about. In a trade negotiation, it's like chlorinated chicken or whatever else, yeah? And by the way, you can have labelling. You don't have to be an idiot and eat that stuff any more than you have to be an idiot and drink Coca-Cola or eat Burger King or whatever it is, yeah? I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that you shouldn't be consuming. So far as the drugs is concerned, that is an issue because people might not have a choice with the final price of it. They might not have the choice to get those drugs. That is an issue. That is something that can be negotiated, just like anything can be negotiated in a trade agreement. Oh, and by the way, we haven't even bothered trying to negotiate a trade agreement with the EU, have we?
From Toby Rideout, which is exactly on this point.
Yeah, should we be concerned that Donald Trump is eyeing up the NHS?
Annalise?
Yes.
Yes.
I refer to the above.
Is what you're
in
going to
one
say.
word. I mean, I could just finish my answer there. But
Moron,
that would be a novelty.
opportunist moron.
Thank you. We should be concerned, but I think we should also be concerned that when he said that from a podium, he had the UK Prime Minister next to him and she didn't contradict him. She didn't say, no, we don't agree with that. She just said, well, in a negotiation, you've got two different parties who negotiate and kind of flannelled on. She didn't say, that's not what we're going to do in the UK. So it's very, very concerning.
That is not fair, actually, I have to say. As much as I dislike this builder bitch, frankly, Theresa May, that is not fair towards her because she said what she should have said, which is that there are two sides in a negotiation for a trade agreement, and we would reserve the right to negotiate properly, and that is exactly the correct approach at that stage, at this pre-stage of any trade discussion.
Eric, some American firms do already supply services to the NHS.
Yes, of course, but they don't do so in the kind of untrammelled way that we've seen in many other countries that have a completely privatised health service. And I think that's the concern that many people have.
Is that your genuine concern, that the NHS would be completely privatised? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, let's be honest, we've already got quite a lot of privatisation. It's proceeding apace, sadly, under the current government. But if we did have the National Cancer Scanning Service in the Thames Valley is currently about to be handed over, it appears, to a private provider, even although we've been told that there won't be any more privatisation under the current Secretary of
for crying out loud. It's been happening under Tony Blair, you stupid woman.
Real problem when you start to cover services in trade deals, because then legally it's very, very hard for governments to say, no, actually, you can't touch that, because then the company can just say, well, actually, according to this trade deal, yes, we can. And if you don't like it, then we'll take you to an international court and we'll sue you. And that has happened in relation to some other countries' services. So we should not be letting it happen to our NHS.
Now, Piers Morgan, Donald Trump said everything would be on the table in trade deal, including the NHS. When he spoke to you, he said actually the NHS wouldn't be on the table. I mean, next time he mentions it might be back on the table. It's hard to know.
Well, I think something happened between the time that press conference finished and he walked with Theresa May about 50 yards down to the Churchill War Rooms where I was, waiting to do an interview with him, and they clearly had a conversation. I think it was explained to him, look, this isn't just playing badly with Labour on the left, which he wouldn't care about, it's playing very badly with the Conservatives here, particularly the leaders who are people who are trying to be the new leader of the party, makes their lives very difficult.
But what should people believe, given he changed his mind in the space of what?
Donald Trump's a business guy, so he wants to do, he considers himself half British. His mum was raised in Scotland until she was 18, and he is a businessman to his core. He's not an ideologue, he's a business guy. He's looking at a great new trade deal. He keeps saying this. He wants it. Remember, Barack Obama, we were back of the queue. Donald Trump,
that's
front
right.
of the queue. This is great. He believes in Brexit. He believes in this country having a good deal with him.
He's not said we're front of the queue.
Well, actually, he has said that. He has said that.
Yes, he has said that. He has said that, Fiona Bruce at the BBC.
He said it to me in the last interview I did last summer, on Air Force One. He did. He said we were front of the queue for a trade deal.
That's right.
He considers Britain to be one of his most important countries in the world. And on the NHS, something happened to that little walk down where he changed his mind. But when we get in the room with them, he's going to say, OK, let's do a deal. What's on the table? Then it's down to us and our negotiating team. Now, part of the reason we're in this horrendous mess over Brexit is that we've had such terrible negotiators who've dug us into this appalling position we find ourselves. Donald Trump and his team are good negotiators. So when it comes to a trade deal with the Americans, let's put some damn good business people in there and let's do a good deal with them.
Toby, what's your feeling on this?
I would like to say that one of my concerns is that being the country that we are, detaching ourselves from Europe, becoming a minnow in a large pond, a country like the United States, they may want to do business with us, but actually, and Donald Trump is a businessman, but the difference between businessmen and humanists and politicians who are humanists are that they're just looking to get the best deal for them. And I'm very concerned that this, like the United States, and we would find ourselves exploited. Also, I'd like to say that I'm concerned about, I've experienced the American health system, and I really don't want to give up those things to these countries where people check your wallet at the side of the road to see if you've got health insurance before they agree to treat you.
Look, you know what? I'm sorry, but this guy is just deluded. He just hasn't got a clue. The fact is that Donald Trump said himself the other day. Now, hold on a sec. This is gonna take a little bit of time to find this, maybe a minute or so, but I want to find this because it's very relevant to that, and it's an important point that needs to be made about our trade potential with the United States as outlined by Donald Trump at the press conference with Theresa May, whenever that was, a couple of days ago. I don't know, truth, a day seems such a long time ago at the moment. Let me see if I can find this. Just bear with me, people. Yeah. Right. Okay. Here we go. This is what he said. Yeah. So we're a minnow, according to that bloke in the audience, that is also concerned of the fact that the states have their own rules and regulations, which, you know what, they're an independent nation. They're entitled to those, as long as they don't really hurt people and they're not like, you know, for example, using concentration camps like China that we seem to be fine with. Donald J. Trump at the press conference said, the UK is America's largest foreign investor and our largest European export market. As the UK makes preparations to leave the European Union, the United States is committed to a phenomenal trade deal between the US and the UK. There is tremendous potential in that trade deal. I say probably 2 and even 3 times of what we are doing right now. And so I'm sorry, mate, but you really ought to pay attention Something else he said, just as an aside, in that press conference was referring to the UK. This is a great, great country, and it wants its own identity. It wants to have its own borders. It wants to run its own affairs. I believe it would be good for the country, yes, referring to Brexit, because the question was, do you think Brexit is the answer? And that, folks, is why the globalist fascists hate this man, smearing him at every turn, each and every day. Conversely, it is why they fetid nation slayers like Obama and Hillary Clinton. Okay, let's carry on.
I mean, and Nikki, I mean, Toby has a point, doesn't he, in terms of...
He has no
Toby
point.
described this Britain as a minnow
He's
compared
ignorant.
to the juggernaut of the United States. And what about Annalise's point in terms of Theresa May not standing up for the NHS when she was next to Donald Trump?
Okay, there are two remarkable things about this. Firstly is the Donald Trump interview with Piers Morgan, where Donald Trump actually managed to get a word in edgeways, which is unlike most of other people who are interviewed by Piers. And it was quite an interesting word.
Low blow for a fellow Morgan. That's really...
Yes, I've watched the Twitter feed about this. I keep hearing Morgan having a go at on the Twitter feed, and I keep thinking, oh, thank goodness it's Piers Morgan they're having a go at, not me for once. So, look, the point about the NHS is that actually, to answer the serious question, this is a negotiation, and many people in this part of the world voted for Brexit. And what Brexit means is there are going to be trade agreements that are going to be done with other countries. But it's a negotiation.
Not under that withdrawal bill, there wouldn't be.
And getting into the interview was that actually the Conservative government, particularly led by the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, fought back immediately to make clear the NHS is not on the table. So by the time Donald Trump sat down...
Hold on a second. Let's just be clear, yeah. This woman voted for Theresa May's withdrawal bill every time. 1, 2 and 3. And she is now saying that we're going to be negotiating trade deals. We wouldn't be able to. We wouldn't be able to if we had somebody like that running the country, yeah? And isn't she in the cabinet? She shouldn't even be in Parliament.
He had been told in no uncertain terms that under a Conservative government, the NHS is not going to be part of any trade negotiation.
So if Michael Gove were to become Tory leader, to become Prime Minister, are you guaranteeing then he would make no new deals regarding the NHS with the United States?
So this week I have been co-chairing or overseeing a series of hustings with all the Conservative leadership contenders. They were all asked about this, and they all said the NHS is not up for sale.
That's
in the trade negotiations.
To be honest, it's not up for sale. I'm not even sure what that means. What I'm asking very specifically
it's been up for sale for decades now, since the days of Blair. Successive governments since Blair have put the NHS on the market. Last year, what was it, 170 or something health centres closed down? Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, but they're trying to say that there's a problem with Donald Trump, but it's fine if we just, if we just sell out the NHS. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing on both sides of the House.
The answer is all the contenders said the NHS is not going to be part of the trade negotiations in relation to the US. And just to answer Annalise's point, the involvement of private providers in the NHS started under the Labour Party. That it was a Labour Health Secretary
and continued under yours.
That oversaw the move of Hinchinbrook Hospital, not a million miles away from here, to private providers, and there's always been, and that's exactly what the Shadow Health Secretary has admitted.
But Nikki, the difference is we've learned from that experience. And we've learned...
You've learned because you're in opposition. Yes, that's right.
No, not because we're in opposition. That is not the case, I'm afraid. It's not the case. We've learned that it's not delivered value for money, and it hasn't improved patient outcomes, and it should have stopped. And quite frankly, if you agree, then I would like to see more Conservative politicians challenging what's happening within the NHS at the moment.
We can have a separate debate about what we mean by private providers. GPs or charities, are we honestly saying we don't want something like Macmillan Cancer to be involved in the NHS? Because they are technically private providers. But going back to the original thing, well, exactly. So let's have a proper debate about these things.
Yes.
But let's have a proper debate about the NHS not being part of the trade negotiations. The NHS is a very precious thing. There will be other elements of trade negotiations. It's going to be it's a negotiation that is going to take a long time. These negotiations that's why I'm very sceptical about Brexit, but I am backing Michael Gove for the leadership, because actually somebody who wanted Brexit should be the person in the Prime Minister chair to deliver it.
Woman in the front.
I'm sorry. Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec. What did she say there? I need to go back on that bit. I want to see what she said because I'm sure it was hilarious and I didn't quite catch it.
NHS, because they are technically private providers. But going back to the original thing, well, exactly. So let's have a proper debate about these things.
Yes.
But let's have a proper debate about the NHS not being part of the trade negotiations. The NHS is a very precious thing. There will be other elements of trade negotiations. The negotiation, but it's going to take a long time. These negotiations are. That's why I'm very sceptical about Brexit, but I am backing Michael Gove for the leadership.
Oh, God. OK. Yeah, I thought it was going to be something hilarious. OK.
Somebody who wanted Brexit should be the
somebody who wanted Brexit or was controlled opposition by the looks of it.
Person in the Prime Minister chair to deliver it.
Yeah, sure. The guy who's saying, let's just extend it until, I don't know, we get some kind of a deal or whatever, you know, some kind of a withdrawal deal like Theresa May style. I'm sorry. No, there has to be a cut-off. And by the way, we just want what was in the pamphlet, yeah, that we all had to pay for. Even if we strongly disagreed with the fact that we had to pay for that propaganda going out. Leave the customs union, leave the single market, leave the ECJ. Very simple. That is Brexit. Deliver.
Woman in the front.
Backtracking slightly, upon Annalise's point of Theresa May should have spoken up when Donald Trump mentioned about the NHS. But you just said it was wrong of Jeremy Corbyn to stand in front of thousands of people in London and protest what Donald Trump done. So why is it wrong of Theresa May to stand by and
Annalise
say
wasn't saying that Jeremy Corbyn was wrong to protest, not at all.
Did you not say?
No, she was supporting. She was definitely supporting her leader. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think he was right to do that. And he was right to seek a meeting with him as well, which was sadly turned down.
Yeah, the woman there in the corner.
Of course it was turned down. Why on earth would he want to, have a chat with Steptoe, for crying out loud?
I'm a nurse in the NHS. I'm a community nurse. We already have a dreadful recruitment problem. Let's not make it any worse by involving Trump.
Yeah.
Somebody else that just is completely conditioned by probably the BBC, yeah. Somebody that needs to listen to this show and will probably think that I'm a right-wing fascist or something, when actually, you know what, I just analyse what's going on, and I'm sure that a lot of you folks do as well, but to try and turn that tide is very difficult, huh? It's very difficult. People are so conditioned, it's incredible. I can't really, I empathise with that woman, with what she says, because every day, every news broadcast is propaganda, and that is the biggest problem we have. It's not the politicians, it's the fact that there's no journalism to hold them to account.
I think it's really quite a simple thing, really. I mean, there's something like, I think the NHS spends something like £120 billion a year, 18 billion of that's on pharmaceuticals. There is no doubt the Americans are going to want to get their mitts on some of that money. As you say, Piers, Trump is a businessman. He can see a deal. He is not going to be put off. And do not ever forget that when he says his bid is to make America great again, his aim is not to have free healthcare at the point of service for pensioners in this country or for children or for cancer patients. It is about what's right for America. And I completely take your point that everyone...
That's right. And we need a leader who does what is right for Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Falling over themselves amongst the leadership hopefuls the other day to say, oh, we wouldn't consider the NHS isn't on the table. I tell you what, if we're in a situation, and in particular a no-deal situation, somebody like Boris Johnson, he'd be selling his granny as well as the NHS. So,
well, that is distinctly possible.
I think what we're really worried about is that we've had years of really rubbish negotiation, and we don't want to we've lost faith in our government, and we're going to then see this negotiation fall through with Trump, and we don't want that. We want someone strong that's going to be able to negotiate properly with him.
Completely. This is the fundamental point.
Got that.
He's going to have a bunch of killers in that room. The best Goldman Sachs traders you've ever seen and so on, right? We need our own killers. The ones we didn't have in the room with the EU.
Drew, on the original question about Donald Trump and the NHS.
First of all, I think Nicky's really brave making promises that this Tory government can deliver anything at the moment. I don't think that's a real possibility at all. But Donald Trump is not the only person to say that the NHS is up for grabs. The American ambassador said that the NHS is up for grabs as well. And if anybody thinks that you can trust Donald Trump in a negotiation. His whole style is about winning the best deal for him, not for the partner. This isn't a partnership.
That's what
negotiation.
leaders
So
do.
What's wrong with that?
Well, because
Why
our
shouldn't he be putting
our
America
NHS,
first?
especially in Scotland, is far too precious to be left at the hands of somebody like Trump and traded away just allowed.
Well, hang on, the NHS in Scotland.
You know, just as an aside, Facebook reckons that there is 28 people now looking at this on the Daily Brexit page. 29 now, which is very pathetic, by the way. But whoever just shared the show, thank you, because that's why those other couple of folks turned up. If I go to Restream, my new distributor, and thanks to everybody that donated to make it possible that I'm going out with those guys now, which means I'm going out on a bunch of different social networks. Apparently 77 people are watching, 78, 79 people are watching, according to Restream. And so it just goes to show, you know, somebody is lying. And you know what? I reckon it's Nick Clegg.
The NHS in Scotland under your tenure, the SNP.
Pathetic figures, though. Pathetic figures. I mean, this is the problem we got. Yeah, we need to invest in. We need to have a foil to the BBC. We need to have that, and we need to invest in it. Somehow, we need to get together and we need to create that.
He has not exactly been dancing off the rooftops, has
the
it?
NHS in Scotland
waiting
is the
lists
best
have not.
performance.
Waiting lists.
The NHS,
well, okay.
The NHS in Scotland is the best performing NHS in the UK. It has the shortest. It has the best performance in accident and emergency. We have more doctors per head of GPs per head of population than anywhere else in the UK.
You don't have failing waiting times. You don't have the worst record of youth mental health waiting times.
The NHS.
You don't have bed blocking crises. You don't have recruitment crises. Well, I'm putting things to you to point out that your own tenure of running the NHS, actually, it may be better than down here. That's no great boast.
And Piers, you have to let him answer as well.
Yeah, Piers would say, notwithstanding that there are always issues in an NHS which is under pressure, Piers would say, as simply selling off the NHS to the best private bid he could get through Trump.
When did I say that?
Because that's what you've just said.
I believe in the NHS and we should protect it. I don't believe that.
This is in danger of turning into question time between you two. Riveting.
I'll tell you what is it with the SNP? What is it? Why do they always have to twist everything? Piers, I've got to say, Piers Morgan, I always used to refer to him as Piers Moron, but the older he gets, the more I like this guy. I think he's absolutely spot on. Oh, blimey, hold on a sec. How do I... Oh, for crying out... There you go.
Though that is, that's not particularly how I want this programme to go. We're going to move on, but before we do, I just wanted to say that Question Time comes from Brecon next week, and the following week we will be in Tottenham in North London. So call all... I'll get that right in a minute. Call 0330 123 99
well,
88.
It'd be nice if you got the news right.
And go to the Question Time website. You can follow the instructions there. The details are up here. Right, let's move on from Trump. Just for a moment.
To Brexit?
Philip Waring.
Yes. Can it be right that 150,000 pensioners get to decide the next Prime Minister?
Yes.
Well, obviously we're talking about toilet leadership. I think, in fairness, the average age, as far as I'm able to ascertain, of the Conservative membership is something like 57. But when you're 55, that doesn't look that old, I have to say. Piers, go on, let's let you have a go at this.
Well, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? We don't know who these people are, but I would say the same thing applies to the Labour Party. One of the reasons the Labour Party can't get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, when so many of their own MPs want to, is because of the membership structure they set up just a few years ago.
Yeah, but can you answer the question, which is about the Conservative leadership?
I think it applies to both parties, is my point. But in relation to this, yeah, I think we should know who these people are, because they're going to have an enormous amount of sway over the fundamental decision. This leadership contest will be fought and won on one issue, Brexit. That's it. Nothing else is happening in this country right now. We can talk about the NHS, all these things. Nothing else is being discussed other than Brexit. And until that gets resolved, we're paralysed. So this leadership contest comes down to who's got the best Brexit plan. And the people that will ultimately decide who the leader will be making this critical decision, which 30-odd million people in this country voted over, it's 100-odd thousand people. We don't know who these people are. So, yes, I think it's a really interesting question. I think it should be perhaps public knowledge, who these people are, who the members are, and we can see whether there's any corruption. We can see whether there's any people that shouldn't be on that list. But at the moment, we're blind.
OK. I mean, Nikki, just coming to the point.
If anybody has any figures, any exit polls or whatever from Peterborough, please let me know. I don't know what time. I guess the polls closed there an hour and a half ago, something like that. So maybe there's some exit polls coming out now. Hey, let's hope that Brexit Party got a seat tonight because we need to see those tossers in SW1 worried about the gravy train.
I mean, how can the next Conservative leader have a mandate? They're elected by 0.2% of the population, heading a minority government. Surely there has to be a general election.
No, I don't think there absolutely should not be a general election, because what the country wants is Brexit to be delivered, and that's what the candidates are standing on. And so, to answer your question, the Conservative Party does not consist solely of pensioners. I am most definitely not a pensioner.
But it's not just that, it's the numbers. That's
well, no, of course, and it's the numbers and everything else. But the point is, in this country, we vote for a party, and we vote for that person. The person who is leader of that party becomes Prime Minister. So if that leader changes...
Believe you me, we know this. We know this.
As we saw with Tony Blair to Gordon Brown, or Margaret Thatcher to
Theresa
John
May,
Major,
or
then
Theresa
actually
May,
it's still
or
the
Theresa
party
May.
that is in government. And the issue is, if the party retains the confidence, able to win a vote of confidence in the House of Commons, then it will carry on in government.
So if Labour were in a situation with...
You know, when we get out of the EU, we got to drain our swamp. We got to drain our swamp. we got to completely reform it. Of all the ideas I've heard so far, the direct democracy, it sounds like the way to go. And I don't know, maybe if we balance it with some kind of PR or whatever, but that is a debate that we need to have. But when we get out of the EU, that's the first thing. It's like peeling an onion. We get rid of that outer layer. We get rid of that shit, frankly, of the EU, and then we can concentrate on domestic politics. And when we deal with SW1, then we deal with local politics, like the community politics. We've got to deal with all of it, but we've got to do it one stage at a time. Get rid of the outer layer of the onion, and then we got to get rid of these Nicky Morgans, yeah? We've got to get rid of these people.
Where they had one unelected Prime Minister and then another unelected Prime Minister, would you be sitting there saying, yes, that's fine?
Well, don't forget, Theresa May did, of course, go rather unhappily to the country in 2017 and come back being leader of the largest party, but obviously we didn't get the majority in the House of Commons. So she has been tested. We do have a general election coming in 2022. We are facing a national crisis at the moment. I would disagree with peers in sense of to say nothing else is happening is not correct, but clearly Brexit is the largest issue, and it is dominating Parliament, it's dominating public discussion. I asked you earlier on whether we had a question time in the last 6 months whether Brexit hadn't come up, and the answer seems to be no from the ones that I have seen. So we've got to get this resolved, and the country wants this to be resolved before we have a general election. That's critical.
Drew.
Well, this is a failed zombie government, and the leadership race that's within it at the moment is really a fight between who can deliver the hardest Brexit.
Oh, for crying out loud, I tell you what, the SNP, they make me just want to puke. I'm sorry. I mean, you know what, it's hard to be in any way polite about these people. I mean, she was, that Morgan woman was just going on about, like, you know, we've got to sort it out. They never actually say the facts, do they? They never state the facts. I've said it so many times on Daily Brexit until I'm blue in the face, but it's such an important statistic because it really, really sums it out and bears it out. In general election terms, 408 of 650 constituencies voted to leave. Where is the representation from their MPs in Parliament? Yeah, 62.8%. Imagine if a political party, if any party, got into power on 62.8%. I think Thatcher got in on something like 39, maybe 42, something like that. 62.8%. You never hear that on QT, do you?
They've said they've got some ideas about doing fantasy renegotiations with the European Union. That's not...
We don't need to. All we need to do, they need our trade more than we need theirs. Yeah, look at the maths. Look at the maths. All we need to do is talk trade or bugger off. And guess what? They will talk trade. Of course they will.
Going to happen. It's basically taking us up to a cliff edge. They should have been using this time, instead of going through this more internal fighting, which has been the same process for 3 years now throughout Brexit. They should have been going through this process to try and sort things out and listen to people.
They're all Remainers. That's why.
They failed to engage. They failed to listen to the 62% of people in Scotland who voted Remain. They failed to listen to the Scottish Government when they tried to put forward a compromise agreement if Brexit was going to be put ahead. They failed to listen to the Scottish Parliament, every single party except the Tories.
That's because they know you're all morons. And frankly, I do not believe at all that you represent the Scottish people. I don't think it's anything like as simple as that.
And they failed to listen to our MPs in Parliament, and now they're going through this charade of putting a leadership contest together, which is going to just deliver somebody who's ultimately just going to follow in the footsteps of the incumbent Prime Minister.
Talking a lot of crap, really.
Man in white shirt.
I mean, it has to be said, in fairness to that guy, the whole thing is a charade, yeah. Party politics is poison. It is poison. We do need a different system from that point of view, but he didn't actually say that, of course.
Many people claim that EU is undemocratic, yet 0.2% of the population will be deciding the future Brexit deal that we get with the EU. Surely that's a contradiction.
Hold on.
Take back control. That was the slogan. Yes, the man at the back there.
I'm not bothered about how they pick somebody, just as long as the person at the pick is willing to leave on WTO terms.
Right.
That's right. Okay. Well said.
Well, our country's a democratic country. We're remembering all the people that obviously fought for us in D-Day and remembering that. So why are we letting another Prime Minister come in from a Prime Minister that was unelected already, when the country's clearly lost confidence in the party themselves?
Woman here.
Yeah, but they don't have any confidence in any of these parties, do they? I mean, that's kind of the problem here. The system is broken. Our politics is, it's exposed. It was never representative. It has been exposed. And actually, that's the one good thing that's come out of this whole sorry tale, is that anybody who has been thoughtful about what's transpired can see how broken is our politics and how desperately it needs to be reformed for the sake of representation.
My question is United Kingdom is when Wales, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland and England unite on a decision. So when we voted and out EU won, to me that meant that was the final
For the sake
decision.
of.
Why isn't there anybody in the Parliament got enough sense to make that decision?
Well, we have been trying. I mean, we have been
Because they're morons, darling.
trying
But there's
to
always
pass
somebody
the
saying,
withdrawal
no,
agreement.
no.
But what does
Why?
Michael Gove suggest?
Because they don't care about you. They care about the gravy train.
I mean, he set out his stall today in a bit more detail than he has hitherto. What's he suggesting that hasn't been tried already? Can you tell me one thing?
Well, I think it's a lot more about working specifically with Ireland. It's also
So
about
what is
making
he,
sure...
But yes, just on that subject, give me one thing he's suggesting that hasn't been tried already.
Well, he's talking about putting much more work into restoring the Stormont Assembly. One of the things, I mean, there have been
So
many
that's going to be
things
the thing
against-
that unlocks it, the whole thing. That's the one thing.
Well, you know, Fiona, that there's not just one thing that's going to unlock it. It'll be a combination of things. And actually, it's been very interesting listening to some of the debates from a couple of years ago, how people have moved. And I think people have moved in Parliament. People have moved further.
Oh, answer the bloody question. Now she's diverting, yeah. So hold on a sec. Gove wants to do something about talk to Stormont. All he needs to do is say, talk trade or bugger off. It's as simple as that, and it always was as simple as that.
From the shock, whether they were celebrating or very miserable about what happened in June 2016. People have now moved. I've moved. I wanted to remain in the EU.
Yes, absolutely, clearly.
Frankly, I just want us to get on with it, get out. I'm afraid I disagree.
You don't. You voted for the withdrawal agreement, you liar!
With WTO terms completely, but I do want there to be a deal because I think this country absolutely needs to move on. And I'm
WTO terms is Brexit. Let's be clear. That is leaving the EU. That is the deal that we need. It's not a no deal. It is a WTO deal. That's exactly what we need.
Somebody's got a different view from Michael Gove, but I very much think he is absolutely ready to lead the country. He set out a very clear plan today.
He's an idiot.
Part of it involves Ireland, Stormont.
He's an opportunist twat.
Assembly, involving obviously a whole new team of negotiators, going back to the point for the lady.
And the fact is that anybody that wants to extend, that is even if they remotely considered it, that would give away their cards. It's like playing cards. Oh, look, here, have a look at my cards. Have a look at my cards. The guy is an idiot.
Hear about really tough negotiators, but also think about the future relationship as well, but also making sure that we have a full stop, bring the backstop to an end as quickly as possible. And some quite interesting noises tonight from the EU that have been reported by the BBC's chief Europe correspondent. Annalise.
Oh, God. Look, I mean, I'm sorry, but I just do not buy Gove at all. He has just clung on into that cabinet. He has had no principled position whatsoever whilst he's been a member of that cabinet. He hasn't said boo to a ghost, whatever it is, over Theresa May's withdrawal agreements. He voted for all of them. The guy is a fake. He is just like Theresa May. And practically all of those candidates for Tory leader are. The only ones possibly worth spit are Esther McVeigh and, hold on a sec, Steve Baker. Possibly. Seems to me. I don't know. I don't trust any of them by default. None of them. But Gove? No way. No way. I mean, you come on, you can see, you just look at he clearly is a toady lickspittle. I mean, he personifies exactly that. Yeah. He was, he was leading the Leave campaign with Boris. He never talked about the FCO 301048, did he? He never talked about how we were taken into the EU. Neither did Boris, by the way. Neither did Boris. I just think that to trust either of those two characters is very, very dodgy. The only reason I would trust Boris is because I think he's got this kind of Churchillian complex. That he's kind of likes the idea. I quite like that. I think I might become a hero. I think that he would do it for vanity. That is the only reason I've got any faith in him whatsoever, is because I think that his vanity would lead him to give us Brexit. Got nothing to do with what's right or wrong. But so far as Gove is concerned, he has already said he's happy to extend beyond Halloween. No way. You've got to be joking. You are a joke.
Lise?
Well, to go back to the original question, all the decisions around this should not be being made by a very, very small number of people, by just around 100,000 of them. And actually, what we see occurring at the moment is a kind of bidding up between all the different candidates about whether they would countenance a very extreme Brexit. I'm afraid I don't agree with the gentleman. Obviously, everyone's got different views on this. But if you look at what the impact of leaving without a deal would be on jobs, I mean, I'm very concerned about this.
Oh, bollocks.
Because I live very near to a car plant which has said very explicitly.
It's like, you might as well be Mark Carney sat there.
What the impact of that would be on complicated supply chains. I think it's a responsibility, actually, of all of us to think about people's jobs and the impact of decisions on people. And yet you've got some Conservative leadership candidates who are even saying, well, maybe we could think about not having Parliament sit at all until we get to...
Good idea. Kick them all out, for crying out loud. I'll tell you what, in Spain, they didn't have a government for about a year. The economy increased. It improved. Everything improved. Oh, for crying out loud, shut them down. Let's have an amnesty just for a while, Do the country the world a good.
Until we get to the leaving date.
Hang on, wait, that was interesting. So you're talking about Dominic Raab, and you just said, hang on, he's mad.
No, I said it's... No, I didn't say... I said it's mad.
Oh,
and clearly, proroguing Parliament... I'm sorry to interrupt Annalise, but proroguing Parliament is clearly a mad suggestion. You cannot say you're going to take...
No. I'm sorry. I refer to what I said earlier. 408 of 650 constituencies voted to leave. And yet these MPs all vastly Remainist. The disparity is absolutely beyond comprehension. Proroguing Parliament is exactly what democracy requires, apparently, evidently. It is ridiculous. The idea of it, I agree. I understand, but I'm afraid that our parliamentary process is so broken, so bought, that would be a better option than having them leading us into tyranny, which is what they're intent on doing. And so Dominic Raab's idea, I have to say, it sounds pretty good. I don't trust Raab either, but on the other hand, I don't think that's a bad idea, and he's sounding fairly genuine at the moment, so far as a Tory MP can.
Take back control to Parliament, have Parliament sovereignty, and then go, oh, by the way, we're just going to shut Parliament down for a couple of months, so we're just going to drift out on a no deal.
Out of interest, what do you do in...
Drift out on a no deal. That's what we voted for. That's what we voted for, darling. Get used to it.
3/4 of our Parliament have for 3 years, and I voted Remain, have for 3 years steadfastly refused to enact...
They all voted Remain. Everybody on this panel voted Remain. That's why I'm doing this show. That's why I'm doing QT analysis, to show the propaganda from the BBC. Where is the democratic representation of the country from that referendum?
The result of that referendum.
Well, let's let Annalise answer that, because we interrupted you.
I want to hear that question again. Sorry, I interrupted
Annalise, but proroguing Parliament is clearly a mad suggestion. You cannot say you're going to take back control to Parliament, have Parliament sovereignty, and then go, oh, by the way, we're just going to shut Parliament down for a couple of months, so we're just going to drift out on a no deal.
Out of interest, what do you do when 3/4 of our Parliament have for 3 years, and I voted Remain, have for 3 years steadfastly refused to enact the result of that referendum?
Well, let's let Annalise answer that, because we interrupted you.
I'm really curious what the MPs have to say about
maybe
that.
I can respond if you give me a
answer.
second. Thanks for that.
You can have as many seconds as you like.
Brilliant, good, because I can explain to you that actually, for the last many, many months, those of us, including myself, who campaigned to Remain, initially thought, right, there is the result. We need to deliver that result. There has to be compromise, OK? And that's what I looked for from the first time that I came into Parliament. That was what I expected we would get from the governing party and from MPs within it. What we sadly had instead is a small group of MPs within that ERG group, that very right-wing group, and they've said nothing is acceptable to them apart from having an extreme Brexit that they know, and they've seen the evidence. This is people who've seen...
Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Extreme Brexit. I think she means Brexit, yeah. There's no hard Brexit. There's no soft Brexit. There's Brexit. There's what we voted for, yeah. Leave the ECJ, leave the single market, leave the... Oh, Jesus Christ. It's like so boring to have to repeat it.
Seen the briefing.
So what is Labour? Out of interest, what is Labour's position?
Well,
because it seems to change every week.
No, it doesn't.
So why don't you clarify for everybody what is Labour's position?
With respect, Piers, you've seen, surely.
Tell me. I have no idea. Jeremy Corbyn looked me in the eye and said they were dead.
Right, I'm going to rewind this a bit, because this is all very exciting. It's kicking off now. It's kicking off with the Labradoodle and Piers Moron, who these days is slightly less moronic. But I need a pee, and so I'm going to just leave you with some music from So there you go. Give me 2 minutes, 2 minutes, people. Pee break. Get a cup of tea quickly. Right. Okay. Always put on a second track on the playlist just in case you pee a pint. Right. Okay. Let's carry on.
Well, to go back to the original question, all the decisions around this should not be being made by a very, very small number of
Now,
people.
hold on a sec.
I wanted to
hold on. I
remain-
want to get back to Piers
James,
Moron's question.
But proroguing Parliament is clearly a mad suggestion. You cannot say you're going to take back control to Parliament, have Parliament sovereignty, and then go, oh, by the way, we're just going to shut Parliament down for a couple of months, so we're just going to drift out on a no.
Out of interest, what do you do in 3/4 of our Parliament have for 3 years steadfast, and I voted Remain, have for 3 years steadfastly refused to enact the result of that referendum?
Well, okay, let's let Annalise answer that because we interrupted you.
I didn't.
That was interesting.
I didn't hear it. I want to hear what he
Suggestion.
said. I want to hear what he asked.
3 years steadfast, and I voted Remain, have for 3 years steadfastly refused to enact the result of that referendum.
Well, okay, let's let Annalise answer that because we
Quite right.
interrupted you.
I'm really curious what the MPs have to say
Yeah,
about
maybe
that.
I can respond if you give me a second. Thanks for that.
You can have as many seconds as you like.
Brilliant, good, because I can explain to you that actually, for the last many, many months, those of us, including myself, who campaigned to Remain, initially thought, right, there is the result. We need to deliver that result. There has to be compromise, OK? And that's what I looked for from the first time that I came into Parliament. That was what I expected we would get from the governing party and from MPs within it. What we sadly had instead is a small group of MPs within that ERG group, that very right-wing group, and they've said nothing is acceptable to them.
Well, hold on a sec. What is right wing about caring about sovereignty? That very right wing group.
Apart from having an extreme Brexit that they...
Extreme Brexit. Having an extreme having what the people voted for. Leaving the EU. Is that extreme?
No, and they've seen the evidence. This is people who've seen the briefings.
Seen the evidence. Seen the evidence. Seen Project Fear. Oh, they've read the editorials in the Daily Mail and the Express, which is bought by the Mirror Group now, which is also Remainist. There isn't a single shag rag on the high street that cares about sovereignty, that actually talks about sovereignty. They all, every single one, without exception, want us to stay in the EU. That is extreme. That is extreme. What's wrong with protecting your culture? Yeah? Look at the state of the UK now. The UK has paid £500 billion into this club. Other major members of the of the EU have paid in just 10 or maybe 20 billion, if that. The disparity is incredible. If you're an elderly person in the UK, you would be rightly concerned as to whether or not, if something happened to you, whether or not you'd get a hospital bed. Whereas if you go to other countries in the EU, the health services can be better. Where I am, in Spain, the health service is better than it is in the UK. And yet this country is bankrupt. So how does that happen? How has that worked out? We've got all this big debate about one railway line going up the UK, this HST thing, and the cost of that. One single line. In Spain, they've got these lines crisscrossing the country. Crisscrossing. Not just one, but about 6 or 7 or 9 of these lines. They've all been paid for by Northern European countries. They haven't been paid for by Spain. They've been paid for by Northern European countries. That's where the £500 billion has gone, into projects like that. You see these EU signs. Paid for by the EU. No, paid for by the UK, by the Dutch, by the Germans, by the French. And look at the state of their social welfare systems now. And of course, all the migrants, they want to go to those Northern European countries because they're the ones that traditionally have had the prosperity. They're not now, but they have. And therefore, they've had decent welfare systems. And they still have those welfare systems because these politicians don't dare to downgrade the welfare systems. Instead, the debt just increases, or there's more austerity in other areas, but the welfare continues. And these people are there, you know, and the southern European countries are not being affected in the same way. Italy, yes, because Italy is a transit route. It's a safe route across the Atlantic, across the Mediterranean. Getting over to Spain is not. Close to that mouth between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic is very choppy, very dangerous, and therefore they don't come that way. They don't like to. Anyway, I'm sorry, I've lost my thread a bit there. But the fact is that let's just hear that back a bit. Just hear that back.
And that's what I looked for from the first time that I came into Parliament. That was what I expected we would get from the governing party and from MPs
compromise
within it. What we sadly had instead is a small group of MPs within that ERG group, that very right-wing group, and they've said nothing is acceptable to them apart from having an extreme Brexit that they know, and they've seen the evidence.
Extreme Brexit. People just want to control their own affairs. And, you know, they probably just don't want to give away their military with all the tradition and their nuclear capacity to a bunch of folks in Brussels that, you know, at the moment, they're not, by the way, but they may be benevolent, relatively speaking. In the future, what will they be like then? Because they're basically elected by cronies that are all on the take, that can be easily bribed in the same way that they are being bribed in SW1, quite clearly. The jobs with gravy trainers. We do not know. We cannot trust them now. I mean, Juncker, for crying out loud, was setting up tax havens when he was PM of Luxembourg. He is a fascist. He's the definition of a fascist. A politician who colludes with business against the interests of the people. That is fascism. Jackboots are optional. They come later when PESCO is realized. These people now are dangerous, but what comes later could be far, far worse. And that's the grave concern, not what we see now, but what could be. That's what we have to be. That's frankly what scares me more than anything. This lot at the moment, yeah, it scares me. I mean, for example, tomorrow we've got Article 17 coming in. It was called Article 13. The copyright thing, yeah, the copyright thing, EU legislation. They changed it to Article 17. It's a classic way to just, you know, change the name of it and then people won't know, it'll confuse them and all the rest of it. They won't know what they're talking about, etc., etc. It's the same thing as copyright. It's basically that you cannot use it basically restricts free speech. Shows like this, for example. So we cannot get the word out as easily. People will be able to, content providers will be able to say, you can't use that content because of Article 17. Facebook will just ban it outright. And that will probably happen. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last question time analysis, the first and last that's live. I wouldn't be at all surprised. But anyway, okay, we'll carry on. Yes, I think that the idea that Brexit is extreme is just utterly duplicitous, yeah. The fact is that people want to be able to control their own destiny. What's wrong with that?
This is people who've seen the briefing.
So what is Labour? Out of interest, what is Labour's position?
Well,
because it seems to change every week.
No, it doesn't.
So why don't you clarify for everybody what is Labour's position?
With respect, Piers, you've seen, surely.
Tell me. I have no idea. Jeremy Corbyn looked me in the eye and said there would never be a second referendum.
Well, I'm very sorry,
Your last
Piers,
manifesto of the last election promised to deliver Brexit. Nothing you've done since shows anybody in this country that as a party you have any will to deliver Brexit at all.
I'm very sorry, Piers. I think you've been living in a bunker, quite frankly, for the last...
No, he hasn't. You're a liar. You are a liar, as well as a labradoodle.
Last few months.
I think your leader has. Your leader has.
If you've not seen...
When was your leader last on this programme?
Actually, it's called Question Time.
Yes.
Look, what's happened with the Labour Party is incredible, absolutely remarkable. Yes, he's absolutely right. They said they would honour the referendum result in that referendum, as did the Tories, by the way. And since then, we just have seen them pulling away from it. About the only person who hasn't been, actually, has been the leader, Jeremy Corbyn, because he has been trying to, I guess, this is my assessment, keep the party together. But the fact is that he has got this faction which did control the party until basically pretty much, pretty recently, of Blairites. The Blairites that took in the infiltrators that should never have been in the Labour Party. They were never in any way socialist-minded. Tony Blair, he admitted, I have no ideology. I believe in a sort of a third way, which he couldn't define. I can define it for you, the Liberal Democrats. That's who you should have joined, the Liberal bloody Democrats. And maybe they will end up being in the Liberal Democrats with all the bloody chuck-up party leftovers as well. That's where they should be. The fact is that it's the Keir Starmers, the Hillary Benns, who, God, his father must be turning in his grave at the use of that name. He ain't no Bennite. These are the people that could really calling the shots in that party, or that are restraining the leadership that is Eurosceptic. This is an assessment. And by the way, I haven't got much time for Corbyn. I wouldn't vote for him from the point of view of, he's no good with a calculator, that's for sure. And he's way too liberal in terms of his being able to be dishonest with people, yeah? He's very dishonest with people about what he can and cannot achieve, and he proved it with that manifesto, I think, and with the way that he tried to court the young vote and all the rest of it, and all this kind of showbizy, schmaltzy stuff, a lot of rubbish. But on the other hand, he has been a Eurosceptic. I think he's an idiot, frankly, but he has been a Eurosceptic. And the Blairites, they are not. They are utterly globalists. They're total globalists. They might as well be wearing boss suits, jackboots, and marching bloody frog marches. That's the kind of characters that they seem to be. And they are utterly frightening. And that Labradoodle is being completely dishonest by saying that in any way, shape, or form, they are honouring their manifesto.
The reason is because there's a lot of people in the audience who want to ask questions, so let's just hear from you there in the front.
I just think it's a bit outrageous, Piers, that you're turning on somebody for changing their mind when you're happy for Donald Trump to change his mind in 30 seconds.
So the original question was, let me drag you back to it, was about, can it be right that 150,000 people decide the next
Well, I think the simple answer to that has got to be no, because that 150,000 people, I think you can be fairly certain a lot of them will have absolutely no idea about the lives of a lot of ordinary people who are trying to make ends meet and who have been sort of suffering with the last 9 years of austerity. They're possibly quite unlikely to be within that 150,000. So where does that leave us? Well, the other difficulty we've got is that we've got some leadership hopefuls who are drifting further and further to the right. They're offering tax cuts. They're in top.
Okay, they're actually drifting further and further towards what the people voted for in that referendum. And they realise that if they don't do that, if they don't try to honour democracy, or at least this is the hope, that they will be wiped out, obliterated, that they should honour democracy, finally, because maybe, their party means more than just a short-term, kind of buck in the back pocket. I don't know.
Cutting the top rate of income tax. It's the same old Tory stuff that you would expect in a bid to please that 150,000. And as Boris Johnson has said, that to not deal with a very hard Brexit that he is prepared, because otherwise the idea of...
It's not a very hard Brexit, it's just Brexit. There's no hard Brexit, there's no soft Brexit, there's just Brexit. There's leaving the EU, or there's staying in the EU. There's Brexit, or there's Remain. There's no such thing as hard Brexit, there's no such thing as soft Brexit.
Extinction. They will do anything to anyone at any cost to get that job, and that's where we're left, because they're pandering to that 150,000.
It's interesting that no one has mentioned the Brexit party yet. Of course, there's a by-election going on in Peterborough. We don't yet know.
Actually, you know what's really interesting, Fiona, is that you haven't got the Brexit party on the panel.
The result, we will know later tonight or in the small hours. We wait to see the result of that. I mean, much of the Tory vote, of course, going to the Brexit party, as we saw in the EU election.
Yes, and sadly that is the case, and I think the way to stop that is to deliver Brexit. Brexit. And
I'm sorry, woman. I'm sorry. Damn it, you're a duplicitous cow.
so that's why we've got to get on with it. Look, I'm on the more liberal.
You've had 3 years.
Side of the Conservative Party. I think the answer is not just to go chasing off after Brexit Party votes. It's got to be to appeal.
You're an arse. I'm trying not to swear now.
To the people who voted Conservative in 2010 and 2015, often from the Labour Party or the Liberal Democrats, and that's the way we build a strong coalition to
Where do these people come from?
make sure that we are returned. And obviously, I must just pick up Alison. And I think, please don't make assumptions about all Conservative Party members and
You're arseholes.
their backgrounds and everything else. I mean, like any organisation, there's going to be a wide variety.
I'll tell you, anybody that supports the Conservative Party now is an idiot. I mean, haven't you seen what they've done? They gave us Theresa May, yeah. They gave us a foreign agent, a traitor. A traitor. Ted Heath was a traitor. Almost certainly bribed to take us into the EU because he was a paedophile. Almost certainly. What was it? Veal, the top cop in Wiltshire. Operation Conifer. He said he was 120% sure, 110% sure or something like that. You can only have 100%, by the way, Mr. Veal. But anyway, he said that he was 110, 120% sure that Ted Heath was a paedophile. Where are the questions as to whether or not that's the reason he took us into the EU? Where are those questions? Especially given that, what was his name? Tim Fortescue said, Ted Heath's whip in that government said that we would, would cover up. Yeah, child rape. Yes, child rape would cover it up. He said it on the BBC. As long as they towed the line with government policy. That was the government that took us into the EEC. And his colleague in that office, Ken Clarke. Ken Clarke. He's been on Question Time more than any other person. More than any other guest. Ken Clarke has been on Question Time. And so you social networks out there, if you're thinking about saying, oh, you can't be using this, you can't be using this content, yes, I can. The BBC is the news because they're propagandists.
Of different experiences, but people actually, I don't think you can be a counsellor or even knock on doors, which is what most of us spend our times doing, without actually getting a very good sense and conversations and understanding. And as a constituency member of Parliament, absolutely, I get to see, in fact, the people who ask my help more and more are the people who very much need it, who, for reasons of benefit claims or housing or anything else it might be. So, we do have an understanding. Please don't make assumptions.
But that perception is there, that is those people. I mean, I don't know if many Conservative Party members are here tonight. Any? Oh, right.
Woo!
and how...
Look, young.
It's not...
He's young, not a pensioner.
Well, let's hear from you then.
What I wanted to say was, Nikki, I hate to offend you, but the reason why a lot of the Conservative voters have gone to the Brexit Party is you're supporting a man like Gove who stated he wants to push Brexit even further back. It was an insult to the British people that we didn't leave on the 31st of March. Why should I vote for you? I'm a member, but I'm certainly not going to be putting my vote towards Gove. It's going to be towards Boris Johnson.
It's going towards Boris Johnson.
Absolutely. Look, the crowd can feel what they want. I'm passionate to leave to leave the EU, on the 31st of October.
Well, can I...
Well, in that case, mate, why are you in the Conservative Party? You should be joining the Brexit Party, probably, or UKIP. I mean, for crying out loud. But probably, in terms of actually getting it done, the Brexit Party looks like the way to get it done at the moment. I mean, whatever you think about Nigel Farage.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
So
I think you better had.
Then again, his vote is useful. I mean, these, there's this big entryist thing, isn't there, into the Conservative Party, and these people will be voting for the leader, and these entryists are potentially very, very important indeed to help us not to get the likes of Michael Gove to basically be another Theresa May.
It's a very good challenge, and actually, Michael very much wants to leave on the 31st of October. If we could leave earlier, that'd be fantastic. But the point is, actually, if we are nearly there with a deal,
I mean, he called that date arbitrary, didn't he?
Well,
31st of October.
It is. It's a date that the EU Council came up.
We have a deal. It's a WTO deal. We have a deal. Get a deal. Get a deal. I think she means get an EU-UK deal. That must be a trade deal. But they don't want to talk trade, do they? So tell them to bugger off until they do.
With, if you remember, they couldn't quite agree. Some wanted to go a year extension to March 2020. Others wanted to do less, so they came up with that October date as being in the middle. And I'd honestly say, as a fellow Conservative, one thing has been actually about the fact that people respect the Conservatives, the way that we run the economy.
Bollocks.
No deal Brexit will absolutely, we do not know what the damage will be, but it will be considerable. Even those who advocate in the
Project Fear, yeah? Yeah, it will be considerable damage to the economy. Based on what? Based on what? Based on what? What Mark Carney said? What is he? Morgan Stanley, was it? Or Goldman Sachs? Bankster? Just like Macron? I'm sorry, no. It's just absolute crap. Globalist claptrap.
The party wanting a no deal have said they
It's not a no deal. It's a WTO deal.
accept there will be a disruption. Why would we want...
Yes, well, there probably will be a bit of disruption. I mean, you know, you're going to have to spend a couple of minutes online to fill out the whatnot for the when you're doing an export. That's what I've heard. Business people who do international trade have said you have to go online and it takes a couple of minutes to do the form or whatever, and that's it. And then the form is used, you know, for your future exports and what have you. You don't have to do it again. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that a disruption? I'll tell you, it's more difficult to sort out another Facebook account when you get banned from it, isn't it?
to put the country through that, if, as Michael is saying...
Put the country through that. Hold on a second.
If we had a couple more days or weeks, we were near there with the deal, that's what he's talking about. Not an endless delay, because I appreciate your right to get on with it, but we've got...
If somebody like this trusts Gove, it just goes to show what a charlatan the guy is. She sounds just like Amber Rudd, and Amber Rudd is Mini-May.
Got to do the responsible thing to try to get a deal
But this is
over
the
the
problem.
line.
You're putting your opinion ahead of the people. You basically, I know you're not directly saying it, but
That's
the
right.
17.4 million people who voted to leave, we were promised that we were going to leave on the 29th of March. As parliamentarians are currently feeling, they feel like they are smarter than the average person.
Yes, that's right.
Piers, I mean, you said the only true Brexit is a no-deal Brexit.
Yeah, we're here in Thetford, and the local district here, the area, 64% voted to leave. In the recent EU election, 46% voted for Brexit Party here, which was almost more than all the other parties put together. So the message from this part of the world is very loud and clear. Get on with it and get out of the European Union. And I keep hearing people didn't know what they were voting for. You're all too stupid if you voted leave, all 17.4 million of you. Well, I remember
I don't know what's going on there.
going in and finding a ballot paper, and it didn't mention a deal. It didn't mention anything else. It just said, do you want to stay in the European Union or do you want to leave? And you ticked a box for one or the other. And it is scandalous, frankly. And I say it again as a Remainer. It is scandalous for our democracy that here we are 3 years later and we're still kicking this can down the road. No one's really got a plan of any of these leadership contenders, as far as I can see.
And
But
you're
the
not a
people of this
Remainer
area,
now, though,
they
Piers,
want-
are you?
Sorry?
You're not a Remainer now.
No, I think the only way to resolve this is not more referendums and not more years agonising. Everyone is bored of this, right? They want leadership and they want decision-making. At the moment, a lot of companies are having problems through uncertainty.
That's
and this
right.
thing about
That's
it's going to be a disaster. I think we don't really know. I remember the debate over the euro in the early part of this century, when a lot of the people like Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair, Ken Clark, Michael Heseltine were all shouting just as loudly then, if we didn't enter the euro, it would be a disaster
Well
for this
said,
country.
well said,
we
well
didn't enter
said.
the euro, and it turned out to be the best thing we never did. So I take a lot of these predictions with a pinch of salt. This country, we will survive whatever happens, but let's make a decision and get on with it.
Well said.
The man there in the glasses.
That was brilliant. That was the best part of the show so far. And the first part that was genuine, it was truly like 100. But everything you said has been good. That Piers Morgan bloke, I've got to say, yeah, respect, sir.
How many of you talk very, very well?
Oh, OK, hang on. It was just the chap in front, actually. I'm sorry, and then I'll come to you in a minute.
He was about to have a go at me, so that's good.
Oh, I'm rather sorry I cut you off, sir. Anyway, yes.
Sorry, mate.
With Parliament still divided in the numbers as they are now, could a government survive a no-deal Brexit?
Okay,
Well,
let's hear
no,
from...
we'd be into general election territory, at which point I think we'd have
You'd be rather marvellous
Jeremy
for you,
Corbyn
Annalise,
in
at that
by
point.
Christmas, which will be even more disastrous.
Or the Brexit Party. Why can't they just be honest?
Hang on, let's don't shout out. We'll get the microphone over.
Hold on a sec. Let's hear what he shouted out. Because it was probably...
I've been lifelong Conservative, and all we ever get is, if you don't vote for us now, you'll get Jeremy Corbyn. Well, how can it be any worse? We've got not getting a democracy. If every MP had voted what the constituents had wanted,
right.
we would have been out 2-1. But Labour and the Conservative have got no intention of ever taking us out. So actually, I'm ashamed to have been a Conservative all my life, because I may as well have not bothered.
It is true, Nicky Morgan.
Because none of you have got the integrity to respect your things.
Well said.
Every Leave MP every Leave community should have been represented by a Leave MP, and if they wanted the job, they should have done it. Likewise, Remain communities, their MP should have fought for their Remain preferences.
That's
none
right.
Of you are bothered.
I agree with that. You know, I totally agree with what that man said. If your constituents voted to Remain, then you should be representing that. If they voted to Leave, you should be representing that. That is the way our parliamentary democracy, as set out in the MP's handbook, is supposed to be run. That, gentleman, is spot on. Oh no! Oh no! Hold on a sec. Oh no! Oh no! Hold on a sec. I've just lost question time. I've just cocked up people. I pressed the wrong thing. Oh, what a pain in the neck. Hold on a sec. Let me see if I can get this back. Oh, dear. Oh, for crying out loud. I do apologise. This is the first time I've gone live doing this. So, hey, cut me some slack. That guy was spot on, though. And what a geezer. Oh, it's this week on now. It's okay. I'll be good. I'll be good. I won't say anything too much. That Portello's a very interesting character, though, isn't he? Did anybody read that Scallywag article? Yeah, he never denied it, did Portello? Nope. He was called out. He was called out as a pedo in Scallywag, and the curious thing is that he never denied it. Right. Okay. It might not have been true. I don't know, but he never denied it. Same time as what's his name, Lord, that bloke who eventually sued the BBC for saying something, and won. Oh no, is this going to work? Is this going to work? I don't know. This is going to work. I might have lost it now. What a pain. I do apologise, people. Oh dear. I need to pee again as well. That guy, he was spot on. That's what MPs are supposed to do. They're supposed to represent their constituents. Simples. But they don't. Because they're bought or they're bribed. See if this will work. I'm running on very low bandwidth. Very low. So I'm encoding out at a very low bandwidth as well. So that makes everything a lot harder in terms of, so I really, when the stream's going, don't cock it up, basically, is the moral of this little thing.
In question time.
Right, okay, let's see if we can get him back.
Before we have a general election. That's critical.
Drew.
Well, this is a failed zombie government, and the leadership race that's within it at the moment is really a fight between who can deliver the hardest Brexit. Some have said they've got some ideas about doing fantasy renegotiations with the European Union. That's not going to happen.
Okay, here we go.
It's basically taking us up to a cliff edge. They should have been using this time.
Let's listen to this chap again, because what this guy said was spot on.
Still divided in the numbers as they are now, could a government survive a no-deal Brexit?
Okay,
Well,
let's hear from...
We'd be into general election territory, at which point I think we'd have
You'd be rather marvellous
Jeremy
for you,
Corbyn
Annalise,
in
at that
by
point.
Christmas, which will be even more
disastrous.
Yeah. Brexit
Hang on,
party.
let's-
Okay.
don't shout out, we'll get the microphone over you.
This guy now.
So what I've been lifelong Conservative, and all we ever get is, if you don't vote for us now, you'll get Jeremy Corbyn. Well, how can it be any worse? We've got not getting a democracy. If every MP had voted what the constituents had wanted, we would have been out 2-1. But Labour and the Conservative have got no intention of ever taking us out. So actually, I'm ashamed to have been a Conservative all my life, because I may as well not bothered, because none of you have got the integrity to respect your things. Every Leave MP every Leave community should have been represented by a Leave MP, and if they wanted the job, they should have done it. Likewise, Remain communities, their MP should have fought for their Remain preferences. None of you are bothered.
No,
the man back there in the picture, I cut you off.
I'd like to know if the country is in such a mess. You talked about how many of you are prepared to be in a party that is prepared to prorogue Parliament. You've made such a big fuss about how important we are, it's democratic.
Well, Nicky's already said it's a mad idea.
Oh, well, has she?
Yes.
Oh, well,
Yes.
I didn't...
She did. She said it was mad. I thought she was saying Dominic Raab was mad, which was highly entertaining, but she
what
wasn't.
about Piers, then?
Listen, I don't think we should get to the stage of a constitutional crisis, but we are in a bit of a crisis.
Well,
Let's be quite clear. We're already in a crisis. This country's been paralysed for 3 years.
Well, then have an election.
We had a referendum.
Have an election.
We had
then.
a referendum. Well, wait a minute. Why should we have an election? Why should we be asked to go and vote again if this country simply refuses
because we're
to
stuck,
enact
Piers.
the result
You said
of the
that
referendum?
we're paralysed. An election,
So what
you will have a result.
So what we need to do is actually honour the result of the referendum and leave the European Union. That's it.
The woman in the pink top. No, the woman behind you. I'll come to you, sir.
You say that Michael Gove will get a deal through Parliament, but how on earth is any deal going to get through Parliament, given that we've got John Bercow as the Speaker, who at every opportunity stops everything because it's clear that he supports the remaining in the European Union?
Woman there in the...
She's spot on. Oh, Billy Bollocks Bercow.
In the dress.
Yeah, I find myself in the tricky position of agreeing with Piers, and you're an Arsenal fan, which is really bad. But I actually think the problem is Parliament itself. You have 650 MPs who had a clear mandate. I don't care how you add the figures up and how we look at them. It was Leave or Remain. Leave won, and because of personal agendas, and that's what it is, from both sides of the House, from all parties. They've got their own personal agendas as to what they want to do, and that has stopped your primary role, which is to enact the democratic will of the people. And we're just fed up, and it's undermining everything at the moment.
Totally agree.
You know, something that's really fascinating to me, because I watch all this stuff, and I listen to all the Radio 4 Today and PM and all those programs, and I watch all this propaganda. I know a lot of people don't watch any of it, and some people it makes them feel physically nauseous, and I can understand that, but I watch it because I want to see what the enemy is doing. That's the reason I watch it. But in terms of Question Time, it's fascinating how the audience has changed. The mean average, wherever they go, the mean average across the country, the audience in Question Time has changed over the course of the last 3 years from being more or less Remain, and bearing in mind that the audience is pretty selected. Yeah, the BBC, they don't, you know, they mess it around as much as they can. From being pretty Remainist to these days being far more in favour of Leave. And that, to me, is fascinating. The country is angry. It is angry. And this is a very British revolution that we're seeing going on here. It is so civilised. We're queuing for democracy. But people are queuing, and they're making sure that the government realise that they're standing in line, they're watching, they're waiting, and there might be a bit of running happen if things don't get sorted out. And that's been the Brexit Party's success as well. But I find it very, very interesting, fascinating, and very, very positive, because these people ultimately, they don't want to be lynched, I imagine. But, you know, patience ultimately snaps, and we do have a habit. We have set a precedent of beheading a king, for example, in our country. The British people are very capable of getting very pissed off, and we're seeing it in that Question Time audience, slowly but surely, and it is happening. How many comments have you heard in that audience tonight that have been pro-Remain? One or two, maybe. Remember, if that. I don't think I have. I don't think I've heard any. Maybe one. Incredible. All the Remainers are on the panel.
I'm going to take another question before we end the programme tonight, which is particularly apposite today, from Gwen Porter.
Theresa May said those who served during the D-Day landings belong to the greatest generation. Will future generations be as great?
Ooh.
Depends if we get out of the EU, love.
That's food for thought, isn't it?
Okay, all right. You know what? I think that's basically it. I think that's it. Maybe we'll listen to this, though, because it has been an incredible day. Anybody that watched any of that commemorative stuff, it has been an incredible day. But I'm not sure that this is about Brexit now. But anyway, we just hear this out.
Alison, do you want to kick us off?
I think future generations will certainly struggle to do what those people did. I mean, the stories that we've been reading over the last few days are just very humbling. And I think the stories of what the people achieved, those men achieved when they came out of the air or they arrived up on the beaches, are extraordinary. But then it's when they say how terrified they were as well. And those men, they were that terrified, but they did it anyway. And I think that's very humbling when you see that, and that the sense of self-sacrifice, which is something I think perhaps we have lost now, where too often we can put ourselves before others, which was what got us through that situation then. And I think the way the Queen also has, and she too, she mentioned resilience, which is a thing that generation has, and I really hope that we can encourage and we can build that in our young people, because we're certainly going to need it in the future.
Annalise? I mean, it begs the question, does a generation have to have been through a war to be that great?
Well, I think they certainly need to ensure that they understand and know about that conflict. And for me, it's been particularly poignant to see that, of course, so many of the people who were involved in the commemorations today and for the rest of the week, sadly, probably will not be with us in future momentous commemorations. And that means we've got to work a lot harder to make sure that everybody is aware of what they did. I mean, I was talking to my kids about it this morning, and I was saying to them what happened, how people came off those boats. They had no idea what was going to greet them, literally no idea. Some of them talking about literally, you know, jumping into, in their words, you know, seas filled with blood. And they did that because they knew they had to do it to liberate another country, of course.
So Gwen's question is, can future generations be as great?
Well, I think the most important thing in trying to ensure they will be is making sure that this is never forgotten. And, you know, we're in a similar position, I would argue, actually, when it comes to some of the other horrendous events. Of course, within that war, the fact that those who survived the Holocaust are sadly dwindling in number now as well. And it is harder to convey that experience, I think, when you don't have that personal connection. So we've got to work much harder. Education is a big part of it, I think, to make sure every school is making sure that all the children understand what was done for us.
It's an EU curriculum now, isn't it? I tell you, the way the things are going, the next commemorative ceremony 25 years from now would be held by EU representatives saying how they somehow saved Europe.
Over you, Gwen.
I would absolutely not want to put another generation through that in order to see whether they had the strength and the mettle to be like that previous
They'd all be jumping off the barges looking at their iPhones, wouldn't they?
generation. But I do feel that we've lost the altruism, the sense of behaving for society, not just me. I also think...
The thing is, the bottom line is, why would you want to serve Queen and Country now? When Queen and Country doesn't give a stuff about you, you're just a pleb. They don't listen to you. They don't care about your vote. So why would you want? Why would you want to put your life on the line for them? That is the difference now, quite possibly. But also the curriculum is all politically corrected and common-purposed, and just there's no logic in it at all. But then again, you could argue that the whole war thing was, there's a big sham going on there as well. It's just a completely different topic. I don't really want to get into it now. It's very, very confusing. But what to me is fascinating, was fascinating about today was really what Trump said. How these guys, rightly or wrongly, they thought that they were going off there and jumping off into that water, filled with blood, and running up that beach into hell. Because they believed in freedom and liberty and their personal sovereignty. That they did it for their families. They did it and for their nation as well. And to help other nations, friendly nations, but basically to stop this tyranny so that it didn't reach their door. And now we're expected just to give all that away, just to give everything away to people that don't even speak our language and that take all of our money, just within there, want to introduce taxes, want our military, want our fish, want this, want everything. Our industry is just being decimated. Look at British Steel this last couple of weeks. That is because of the EU policy. Otherwise, we could save it. I think they would be absolutely flabbergasted and disgusted at what they see now, and that's just the sense I get out of it. It's why on earth, having seen what happened at that time, would we now just say, you know what, it's fine, take the keys, it's all right. It's fine. We don't know who you are. We don't know who your successors will be, for sure. We have no idea, but we can take that gamble. It's fine. It's fine. It's just absolutely ridiculous and ludicrous. And the only reason that the kids of today are keen on that is because of this nonsense they're taught by these, tutors and what have you, that are all enmeshed in this common purpose, this EU, this divide rule, this pseudo-Marxist crap, which actually is perpetrated by fascists. I mean, the irony is incredible. But no, I don't think these kids of today have got the stuffing at all to do anything like that. I don't think they have. I don't think they've got a clue about their next door neighbour, let alone fighting for their country, frankly.
That we've lost the personal dignity and discipline that previous generations have had. And I really worry and wonder whether we would get the same response from the next generation if we called them to do the same thing.
We got a lot to do. We got so much work to do to get our country back on track, and countries around Europe back on track. We've got so much work to do. Once we get rid of this EU, we've got to reform SW1. That's the Commons, the Lords, and the civil service. Possibly most importantly. And then we've got to deal with the local politics.